Hello out there, casual fanatics. Jeremy here, and I know it's still been a little while, but this is a casual vlog, also kind of a response to Dawn Forgecast, who recently started doing a Let's Play of Neverwinter. Probably put a link to that down below if you're interested in it. Neverwinter is a MMORPG that I actually have some affinity for. I haven't been able to play it in some time because my laptop is terrible. But he decided to play it and talk about some various different things about role-playing games in reference to the RPGs. His first part largely focused on some of the mechanics of character creation that don't have any mechanical merits, that are choices, as Neverwinter itself says, for flavor, no effect on gameplay. And I actually kind of wanted to give my own thoughts on that as kind of a tie-in, because it really comes in a lot to how I play, well, how I play MMOs, and also how I play, well, any kind of RPG that I play, and certainly tabletop RPGs. That's pretty much my lifestyle there on RPGs, is flavor over gameplay. Not to say that the rules of the games aren't important. They certainly are. They're there to provide a focused experience for each of the games. And, you know, because you wouldn't have a tabletop RPG without, you know, rolling for attacks and damage and all that. I don't think, well, you could. It'd be a very, very rules light system, though. So there's definitely a lot of room for that. But a lot of what I do when I create characters is largely the fluff kind of stuff. I create characters based on my whim rather than the mechanics most of the time. This is no more better evident than in my iconic character, Albie Darkstar, who now, thanks to my Roll Night DM, has a minifig of her. Thanks, Michael. Had to get that in somewhere. A lot of my decisions along the way ended up because of, okay, what would Albie be doing as she's growing in power? What would she experiment with? What would she try to do? At one point, I had her experimenting with wielding a mace in combination with a rod, and that ended up not being that great of a deal. So later on, when I had her multi-class into wizard, she actually started wielding a staff and a rod together, and that worked out much better because the staff she could use for a little bit of melee capability, like the mace of yore, but it also had better spellcasting utility than the mace, because the mace you can't use as an implement. Staffs, you can. So that was partially inspired by mechanics, but also largely as a role-playing feature. She just decided ultimately that what she was doing wasn't working and decided to change it up. My most recent character that I'm going to start playing when our game starts coming up, because, well, a few people of you voted for him, Brang, the half-elf Kensei, or the half-orc Kensei Samurai Slayer. A lot of the decisions there were largely built upon the fact that I was creating a big hulking brute who is also a samurai. Because it is absolutely hilarious to see this rather large half-orc man suddenly dash across the battlefield to smack somebody with his Zanbato-like greatsword. In fact, actually, that was another thing that specifically was for fluff that I came up during the session 0 of our setting. His hands are too big to hold a regular katana. So while flavor-wise it's called a great sword, in truth his swords that he wields are more akin to, say, Cloud's Buster sword. It's the Zanbato kind of style, the very long, heavy swords that would be used as an anti-cavalry sword, horse slayer swords. Probably not going to have them use it to slay horses. Giants, yes. Swords, no. Or horses, no. And but the specific thing that Andrew was talking about in the video there was backgrounds and deities. And while in 4E backgrounds do have some benefits, and 5E, while not a whole lot of mechanical benefits, they do have some kind of play with the mechanics. For the most part, they are there to flesh out your character. They are there to give you an idea of what kind of person your character is. Because each character is not just a set of numbers. They are a person living in a certain fantastical world that has a certain set of powers and skills that they are either employed by someone to use or that they use of their own free will and generosity and altruism. That's basically how RPGs work. And as for deities, well, you have a world where gods are known entities that are over many different things. So it's no wonder that there would be people that would really be devoted to, say, the goddess of the moon, or the god of the forge, or a god of war, there are multiple different gods of war depending on what kind of war you're fighting. If it's a war for justice, you might be, like Bahamut. If you're a war just for the sake of conquest, you might be, someone akin to maybe Orcus, many different kinds of war there. Just a war of pure destruction. Just a war for pure destruction, yeah, you might be akin to Orcus. If you're wanting to fight a war to conquest, maybe you're devoted to Asmodeus. There's so many different ways that you can go with it, and there's not really any mechanical benefit to it. Although, if you have a good GM, he might be willing to play with that and, make those choices feel more real to the game world. And I guess that's something I like having a real connection to as well. Because again, with Albie, she met gods personally. She's hated 90% of the Pantheon, and even after meeting them, that didn't change much, but it ultimately steeled her for her destiny that was to come, where she was going to be hanging out with these people most of the time and probably having to kick their ass if they stepped out of line. So, it wasn't by any, she didn't kind of had a connection to Saloon, but not really a worship. And you can play around with devotion to a certain god that way. Maybe they were growing up in that religion and kind of just had a passive interest in it. Maybe they converted into it. Maybe they came from one race and spent time amongst another and developed a connection to that particular god that way. I once had a cleric whose goddess was a goddess of knowledge that had a similar name of god in Dwarven, was known as the Forge Mother, So, I believe I believe her blessing was, may the Argent Flames forge us ever stronger, or something like that. Something cool like that. It was from Dungeon World some years ago, so my memory's a little off. But it doesn't necessarily have any mechanical benefits. So in Dungeon World, it can, depending how you role play things. But well, that's Dungeon World. It's very role play heavy anyway. In most games, it's really just fluff. But there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, having fluff adds to the experience. Like I said, it makes your characters feel like actual people. It makes you feel like these characters that you're playing are living beings. It gives you an affinity toward them and makes you want to see them live and continue to have adventures. It gives you investment in them. And I can certainly understand people who are just more about the numbers and the mechanics of the games. They don't want to get into the deeper parts of it. You're not wrong, and you're welcome to play the games however you want to. I'm just saying, if you invite me into your group, you're getting someone who's going to be role-playing his character, maybe not as much as possible, but quite a fair bit. And maybe even voice acting them. Because there's nothing quite like getting into a snarky British contralto for a certain warlock. I love doing that voice. It's the closest I can do. It's the closest I can get to doing an actual woman's voice. Because, well, my high notes are not that great. But don't be afraid to use some of those elements that don't have any gameplay effect. Because actually, in a strange way, they do have a gameplay effect. Maybe not on the actual rolls or the actual effects of what's happening, but they're going to have effect on you and your enjoyment of the game. And I know that even in MMOs, there are servers where people roleplay their characters. You go on, pick an MMO. Just pick one. Off of the list, off the top of your head. I guarantee you, there's a server devoted to roleplay. Knights of the Star Wars: The Old Republic? Absolutely. Neverwinter? You bet your ass. World of Warcraft? Probably more than one. Any online RPG that there is that has multiple people is going to have a roleplay server. Because there are people who are there to do more than just fling attacks at random NPC number 37. Random villainous NPC number 37. Actually, there might be some people who would want to fling them at the good NPCs too, but we're not here to talk about them. And I know I've talked about this in part, but that's part of my separation from the games that I love to play and the games that I don't. The games that I love to play are the ones that just let me play the way I want, even if the way I play has no actual effect on the gameplay. I just pick the Pokemon I want in the Pokemon games, for instance. Does it have a little bit of effect on the gameplay? Well, yeah, but most of the effect is non-mechanical. It's psychological, and it does have an effect on your gameplay, because if you're playing in a way that you find enjoyable, it's going to create a feedback loop in your head that makes you enjoy what you're playing even more. So, RPGs, same way. If you like picking stuff, maybe not because it's optimal, but because it makes sense more for the kind of person that you want your character to be, go ahead. I picked a lot of stuff to boost the amount of damage that Brang's criticals can do, largely because I wanted him to be a very hard hitter. Not mechanically, but I wanted him to be a bruiser because in personality, kind of the gruff bruiser dude, because that's not a character type I've ever played before. It's not a character I've ever role played or ever gotten to do before. Most of the ones that I play are either more straightforward and dignified, or a little bit snarky. I normally play those two types, and I wanted to play something a little more down to earth and simple, and that's why I created Brang. And I have a feeling I'm going to have a hell of a fun time with him already, just from the session 0 with the people that I'm going to be playing with. It's something that you have to consider when you're playing an RPG. Even if you are the kind who does focus on the mechanics a lot, don't discount the stuff that has no mechanical value. Try and feed a little in sometime. Try and sprinkle it in. Spice up the game a little with those things that don't matter, because they do matter. They matter quite a lot. They're not going to turn, crit fails into crit successes, but they're going to make those crit fails and crit successes so much more fun to watch. Because it's not going to be just, I hit it with my sword. No, it's going to be Brang Smash! Ooh! Ooh, look at all. Brang Smash hard. It gets you into what's going on and really, it's. Have you ever read a good book or watched a TV show or a movie or something, and you're imagining yourself in the place of your favorite character? I guarantee you, most of the reasons why you do that is because of their personality and their mannerisms, and not necessarily because of what they do. Just a little something to think about. Maybe stuff is just for flavor. Maybe it doesn't have an effect on gameplay, but it's going to have an effect on you. And that's the important part. Keep it casual, y'all.